My name is Beverly Sweeney. I've been working with the museum for about 4 years, I guess, off and on, and I got involved because of Joe's walking tour in Lenoir City.
Okay. I'm Joe Spence. I was the former Loudoun County historian. I'm a retired teacher from Lenoir City High School, and I was one of the founders of this museum.
Okay, tell us a little bit about the building that we're in today.
This is actually the Lenoir City Company building. The Lenoir City Company was a private organization that was formed by businessmen from New York and Knoxville, and one from Lima, Ohio, for some strange reason. And they formed a company and bought the remainder of the Lenoir estate after the Lenoirs had scattered to other places, and they were going to create around 1900, they were going to create a private community in and around what was called Lenoir Station at that time. The land had been settled by General Lenoir from North Carolina, General William Lenoir, who got a 5,000 acre grant from North Carolina for his services in the Revolutionary War. He deeded the land to his son, William Ballard Lenoir, and he moved over here in 1810 to settle the land. And Lenoir City began as a huge plantation, and the plantation thrived until after the war. The Lenoirs owned slaves, they were Confederates, and so when the Union Army came through here, they pretty much devastated the plantation. The Lenoir sons tried to keep it going, but eventually some of the sons moved to North Carolina, some moved to Texas, and so that was when the Lenoir City Company was formed and bought up the remainder of the estate. The building that we're in is the Lenoir City Company building, and it remained, and they owned a lot of land in and around Lenoir City up until just a few years ago. This was built as the office building for the Lenoir City Company. And they operated from here for a long time. As they sold the land and the Lenoir presence waned here in Lenoir City, then I think it was used as an office building. There were some insurance offices in here. Earlier it had been a railroad depot, and the room to my right back here was the first library in Lenoir City. So it's a very historic building, and I think they got it put on the National Register of Historic Places in the 70s. The museum started in the original Lenoir City Hall above Harvey Sproul's law office. He let us have 3 rooms up there, and that's where the museum started in the 90s. And then when this building became vacant, we rented this from the Lenoir City Company. And then later on the city bought the building when they divested themselves of most of their property. That was 3 or 4 years ago. The city is the owner of the building, and that's when we moved over here, though, before that, into the 90s, and these collections have grown from donations from people everywhere. And as we get the funds, we add more interpretive boards that explains the history of Lenoir City.
You had a lot of visitors to come in. What are the hours and days that you are open?
We're open from Wednesday through Friday every week from April through October. We're open from 1 to 4 in the afternoon. We are seasonal, though. We're not open in the wintertime.
Okay.
And beyond our regular hours, we're also open by appointment.
Okay.
For instance, this past Wednesday, I gave a tour group for some a walking tour of the downtown area to some ladies from Tellico Village. They came at 10:30, and then the museum opened at 1. And we do tours by special appointment or special arrangement.
And we're also open during special events when the city has the street festival and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay, this is really the only original Lenoir piece of furniture that we have. This belonged to Henrietta Rutledge Ramsay Lenoir. She was the granddaughter of Francis Alexander Ramsay that built Ramsay House, which is a museum in East Knoxville. But she married Benjamin Ballard Lenoir, who was the son of William Ballard Lenoir. He was a doctor, and they lived in the Lenoir home, which is located in the next block, which still stands. It's been changed, but that home was built by 1820, and that's where her in-laws lived. And then when General Lenoir, when Major Lenoir died in the 1850s, then she and her husband Benjamin Ballard moved into the big house, and she has a very sad history during the Civil War. She lost two sons. She had two young sons, I think they were 10 and 13, that died of probably typhoid fever. She was pregnant at that time, and before 1863 was over, she gave birth to a healthy child, but she herself died because she was under tremendous strain. Her husband was away at different times during the war. I don't think he was actually in the Confederate Army, but he tended to wounded people after the battles were over. So she was running the plantation, and she was pregnant. She was overseeing 50 to 60 slaves. There were grain crops here. They raised large amounts of hogs because the Lenoir hams were famous all over the South. So we have been told, and I've read. So she had a rather tragic life, but this was her meal chest, and this is an actual photograph of her. This was donated by some members of the Lenoir family.
I wanted to speak a little bit about the Lenoir Car Works, which is one of Lenoir City's largest industries. It was about 100 yards from this building on the other side of the railroad tracks. It was mostly a giant warehouse. The building is long gone. The property, of course, is still there, and it's vacant. The Car Works made boxcars for Southern Railway, and on a really busy day they could turn out about 7 boxcars, which when you think about it is a lot of moving parts and a lot of pieces. They used a sand casting method to make the boxcars. Most of these molds that we have here are wooden, and the sand casting method is a combination of clay and sand, and then the wooden molds were tamped down into that, and when they got fully encased, the wooden molds were pulled out and the hot molten metal was poured into the mold in order to make the part. Up here on this wall we have some, we believe are carriage wheels. These of course are hinges of various sizes, and this is a decorative piece, and as you see comes in two halves. The Car Works employed about 700 people, and then upsized during both World War I and World War II. The piece that you're looking at now on the floor, which is mostly black, would have been the underside of the boxcar. If you were on the ground looking up, that's what you would see. And this giant piece is all wood, and of course was the mold used to make the actual undercarriage for the cars. During World War II, the Car Works was retooled to make parts for Liberty ships to assist in the war effort. This mold is actually a manhole cover for an oil tank that would have been on the ships. This, of course, is a dock cleat. We have a pattern here for the ship's wheel, and then over here we have the actual mold for a ship's wheel. The parts that were made here in Lenoir City likely went to the shipbuilding yards in Mobile, Alabama, or maybe Brunswick, Georgia, or Jacksonville, or Charleston, we don't necessarily have records of exactly where they went, but those would have been the closest shipbuilding yards to here, so that's likely where they went.
Okay. Okay, you've just heard about the Lenoir Car Works, which was one of the earliest industries, which led to the growth and development of Lenoir City. And I think kind of the heyday of downtown Lenoir City was in the late 30s on into the 40s and the 50s, because the main street of Lenoir City, that is Broadway, was also Highway 11, or better known as the Dixie Highway. And it ran from, I guess, all the way from Virginia on down into Atlanta and on to Florida. And there was a lot of traffic through here, but there were a lot of stores. Lenoir City's downtown is the Downtown Merchants Association is trying to revive quite successfully the downtown merchants. But when I first came to Lenoir City in 1958, on Saturday, you couldn't get through the town because everybody came to town on Saturday. And we have advertising promotions, sort of Christmas gifts, and spoon rest, keychains, just whatever, mugs that were given by the different companies. It was advertising promotions, and we just acquired this about a year and a half or 2 years ago from Eddie Houck, whose mother, Myra Houck, worked at First National Bank, and she saved everything, the promotions that they passed out, and there were other banks as well. We have ashtrays, money bags, all sorts of things. But one of the more interesting industries outside of Lenoir City in the Martel community was the Armstrong Candy Factory. And we have some of the candy wrappers. We have some of the dyes that they use to print the wrappers. And as we were putting this exhibit together and I was doing a little research, I found out that they sold, they made candy, and then for promotions, sales promotions, they had contests at the different schools, and which I don't know all the particulars of that, but they gave sporting equipment to the schools that sold the most candy. We had this artifact was a bat that has Armstrong Candy Company on it. And I thought, well, maybe they had a softball team or something. But no, this was a bat that they probably gave to one of the schools. So that was an interesting company. And the log cabin, there was a log cabin that was attached to the original one. The building still stands out on Martel Road, just beyond the underpass. But I learned that was a post office and a depot. That would be the first stop for the train after they left Lenoir City. So there's all kinds of curiosities and memorabilia here about Lenoir City businesses. So I think you would enjoy coming in and strolling down memory lane.